In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, and in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, I want to thank everybody, all the distinguished guests, for being here today to see what we're trying to do from the inside of this beast to help our children on the outside of this beast. According to the Washington State Institute for Public Policy, the 1994 Washington Legislature passed E2SHB 2319, a wide-ranging act whose primary purpose was to reduce the rate of violence, particularly youth violence in this state. The program administers grants using federal and state funds for community-based youth violence prevention and intervention. And for the fiscal years of 94 to 96, $2.05 million were spent on these projects. 31% was funded by the state and the remainder by the federal government. Under this legislation, 13 organizations were funded. Prevention programs are often thought of as investments in the future. That is, spending money today on successful prevention programs can and should produce taxpayer and other savings for years into the future. 10 years later, in 2006, that is not the reality here in the state of Washington, nor is it the reality across the United States of America. The United States Department of Justice estimates that there are 30,000 gangs with 800,000 men impacting 2,500 communities across the United States. Tacoma Police Lieutenant Kathy McAlpine and Lakewood Department spokesman Lieutenant Gutu stated in the News Tribune, published July the 16th, 2006, that they are in fact seeing an increase in gang membership and activity, especially amongst the youth. Why are we seeing an increase in gang membership and activity among our young brothers and sisters here in Washington? Is it because these organizations did not try to fulfill their obligation to these at-risk youth? Of course not. These organizations should be applauded for their efforts. But in my research, I found that the vast majority of organizations use as a panacea for the miscreant aspect of the gang mentality recreational escapism. And this is why they were not as effective as they could have been. I've authored the 9 Steps to Empowerment process, or in-step gang prevention and intervention curriculum, and under the umbrella of the Black Prisoners Caucus and our sponsor, Willie Williams, Dale Massey, Kimonte Carter, and myself have been facilitating in-step classes here at Monroe. I spent 25 years of my life active in gang violence, leadership, and recruitment. And in my endeavor to reform, I've studied the miscreant aspect of the gang mentality extensively. In my study, I found that gang activity is not necessarily a cause, but an effect of socioeconomic poverty and trauma. The in-step curriculum is unique in that it addresses certain aspects of the gang mentality that have not been adequately explored. One of these aspects is color addiction. Kay Warner and R. Heiss, in their book, Color and Personality, describe 3 modes of response to color. Number 1 is the differentiated color response, or one who has a normal balance between ego and control. Number 2, the restricted color response, or one who likes 1 or 2 colors to the exclusion of others. Number 3 is the diffused color response, one who loves many colors with the same enthusiasm. I've added to this list the violent color response. The violent color response is a correlation of the restricted color response, including ego, social orientation, and trauma. The violent color response is a reaction, attributed to one who has experienced a traumatic event directly related to or caused by colors or one wearing a specific color. The next aspect that has not been adequately addressed as it relates to the gang experience is post-traumatic stress disorder. I've found that there are biological, neurological, and emotional changes that are procured by a traumatic gang experience. For example, one day we went to the park and we had an altercation with a rival gang. Later that night we were in our neighborhood and that rival gang came through the alley and opened fire on us. I sustained buckshots in the back of my head and in the back of my shoulder. From that day forward, we designated a member to be on watch, gun in hand. We called this being on deck or being on point. Psychiatrist Dr. Spence F. describes this as hypervigilance, and hypervigilance is an aspect of post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. F. states the intrusive memory of the central violent action is a key symptom of PTSD. These memories become intense perceptual experiences, and neuroscientists now say that they become memories in the emotional circuitry. Joseph Ledoux, a neuroscientist, describes what he calls an emotional hijacking. The brain processes information in this manner. Whatever is taken in through the retina is sent to the thalamus. The thalamus acts as transmitters and sends this information to the visual cortex, or the thinking brain. The visual cortex then sends this information to the amygdala. The amygdala gauges the emotional significance of the event and what action to take place. So an emotional hijacking occurs when a perceived threat to your safety circumvents the normal processing of information being fed to the brain. Now couple this fact with violence, trauma, and said acts being committed by a specific group of people wearing or representing a specific color. These people become an automatic threat to your safety, and the colors or uniform that they wear in and of itself become manifestations of their threat. A study was done on Holocaust survivors, and the results were that nearly 3/4 of them said that they still become anxious at reminders of Nazi persecution, such as uniforms. Now, this is not an attempt to draw parallels between the Holocaust and gang violence. And if anyone has been offended, I truly apologize. I'm merely trying to describe an aspect of PTSD. This is what active and inactive gang members experience at the sight of rival gang colors and/or uniforms. They become anxious, hypervigilant, on deck or on point, and in most instances, an emotional hijacking takes place and they act on a perceived threat. Dennis Charney, a psychologist, wrote in his article, Psychobiological Mechanisms, that this is fear conditioning. Fear conditioning is a process whereby something that is not in the least bit threatening, a color or a uniform, becomes dreaded as it is associated with, in one's mind, a frightening experience. We, in our gang experience, associate specific colors and styles of dress and/or uniforms with violent, traumatic experiences, procuring in us aversion to specific colors. Dr. Roger Pittman, a Harvard psychiatrist, states that in PTSD, endorphin changes adds a new mix to the neural dimension, triggered by re-exposure to exposure, and causes a numbing feeling. This numbing feeling is called anhedonia. Anhedonia is the inability to feel pleasure or pain. It's a general emotional numbness, a sense of being cut off from life or from concern about others' feelings. This anhedonia is prevalent in the gang member. He or she does not feel an intense remorse about the life that they attempted to take or they took, or even the feelings of those that are affected by the miscreants of their behavior. We've witnessed attempts to ameliorate miscreant gang behavior from the periphery in forms of legislation and funding and imprisonment. and neither tactic has been efficacious. InStep gives the gang member the tools needed to reform and return to his or her community and effectively attack miscreant gang behavior from the inside out, making them effective in our fight to quell gang violence. In conclusion, I'm confident that the gang member will be more effective in his or her community rather than being ostracized from said community. Every one of those young men that came up and stood here today is under the label gang member, gang affiliate, or gang associate. Every one of my young ones is the lifeblood of our families. They're the lifeblood of our communities. They're the lifeblood of our nation. If we continue to use mass incarceration as a remedy for their miscreant behavior, who's going to be the doctors, the lawyers, the scientists, the people that run this country? Representative Eddie Bernice from Texas said we must give our young people a path to success, not just a path to prison. I concur. InStep is that path. We've tried incarceration, we've tried legislation, we've tried funding. Let's try a curriculum that changes the thought process, because behavior emanates from thought. And if we don't change the thought, we can never change the behavior. I'll leave you as I came to in peace. Assalamu alaikum.